and welcome to an Energy Crew podcast. We're doing this in the home studio of my house. I guess it's a home studio.
Definitely.
Great backdrop. And I told the guest today, you better come over prepared to throw down with me, roll as jujitsu sparring. Is it sparring or is it rolling?
This morning.
It's sparring, yeah. So I want to introduce our first off, I want to say thanks for tuning in this podcast. There's a lot of podcasts out there. Lately, we've been changing this style of podcast, more of a hot seat style questions, question and answer. I think it's you get more kind of insight. Before we've done hundreds of podcasts where we kind of get in, kind of the background, dive into kind of tells your story. However, I'm changing it up. We're changing it up. I think I like getting kind of hot takes from different leaders around the industry. And today is the second time you're on the second time, or
Second time.
second time on the podcast is the legend Jim Holmes, the president of LFS Chemistry, and also the one of the main inspirations that actually got me into the martial art, if you will, of jiu-jitsu.
Love it. Love being an
Well,
influence.
thanks for being here, man. I know that you're about we were squeezing this in the morning. You had a busy day ahead, a lot of traveling, a lot of stuff going on your schedule. So I appreciate you taking your time and joining us today. So I guess in the first hot seat style question on stuff, what are some, I guess, key lessons that you've learned since growing a business from because you started at LFS Chemistry around time of COVID. Is that correct? Right
That's
before
correct.
COVID
About a
started.
year before. It was officially started around May of 2019.
Okay.
First commercial sales at the end of July of 2019, and uh, grew an incredible business all the way up until end of March of 2020 when we all know
It
what
all
happened.
hit the fan. Yeah.
Completions pretty much ceased to exist at that point.
Okay.
Um, we're heavily weighted towards frac stimulation at that point. So it definitely hurt us there, but some persistence and
Well, that was so. Let's start there. That's kind of an interesting place to start your building of your company, right? Or the LFS chemistry company out there. So, what's some lessons that I guess that you've had to learn differently at that moment of time? That because previously you built companies before, you've worked and built teams before. What was some like lessons learned that kind of that you didn't have a page in your playbook about that you've learned from COVID?
sure. So historically, oil and gas is very cyclic. We
Right.
all know that there's this massive waves of peaks and valleys that we all ride, and sometimes they're predictable, and sometimes they're not. This one was one of those valleys that definitely was not predictable.
Correct.
So there definitely was not a playbook for a startup company with less than 1 year of operations, uh, especially a company without outside funding or investment. We self-funded the startup of this company, so
Okay.
there's no fallback plan when we did this. And of course, we certainly weren't expecting the company to go from riding this massive growth trend all the way down to
Where yeah.
what do we do now when there's not a single frac crew running that we were working on at the time.
Right.
Uh, that ultimately turned out to, I think, a little bit be a blessing in disguise in the sense that we had one really good customer that kept us just busy enough to keep the
Sometimes that's
lights
all you
on.
need.
Absolutely. And it was about 3 months of really rough times,
Okay.
but we had accumulated enough assets and enough equity in the company to keep it alive. We
Yeah.
didn't lay anybody off. We kept going, and we decided at that point, instead of sitting back and waiting, these in-person meetings were
I
out.
think a lot of people did that because, again, no one really knew what to do. So a lot of people was like, "I think my plan is to wait or to hope
Sure.
things get better."
We decided to invest more in the research and development side. So
Okay.
we took what we had, and of course we had a lot of time on our hands with folks that we had on staff
Right.
at that moment, and we decided to go develop some new chemistries. And of course, that wasn't easy either when everybody's trying to work remote and
Yeah.
congregate in small areas like a lab.
Right.
But we pulled it off, and we came out of that COVID we'll call it 3 or 4 months
Okay.
of rough, and then we had to start the growth.
So how do you handle? I mean, I guess in that circumstance, it's such a unique circumstance. You just got involved in this company. How do you handle that type of pressure? I guess starting off leading a company.
You try to have some confidence for everybody that you're working with. That's outward and
What do you
internal.
mean you try to have confidence? Dive into that a little bit
Well, as an owner and the one essentially responsible for making payroll and writing
more.
checks,
Right.
especially at that time, there's a lot of sleepless nights. Adds a lot of gray hair.
Right.
Wondering how long is this going to last? How long can we make this work before the really difficult conversations come into play? Which is we just simply can't afford
Yeah.
to do this anymore. and where did those cutbacks come? Is we had an incredible team. It was a small, very small team at the time, but uh, you know, the way we run our company today is the same way we ran it back then. When it comes to personnel, is we don't want to wait for a crisis or a financial review or something else to decide that we don't have the best players on the team.
Okay.
So going into COVID, we had the best players on the team, and there's no reason to let them go other than a financial decision,
Right.
which is the worst one you can possibly make
Right.
as a
Because it's,
business.
I mean, that's out of your control at that point. It's what you want to do and what you have to do are different. They don't align.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, trying to exude some level of confidence that this is going to work. It's going to be great when we
Right.
come out of this. Let's put our heads down. Let's get to work. Let's create some fantastic new chemistries. Some hope we hope that the world's never seen before. So we talked about that
Yeah.
before on the podcast. That creating differentiated technologies is not easy in the chemical space.
Right.
You have buckets that you work within, and then creating something truly unique within those buckets, and then trying to create a need for those. But trying to stay optimistic through that entire process.
How do you go about building that need? Is that more just kind of because chemistry, again, I feel it's one of those things you kind of have to really hold people's hand and walk through, hey, this is what it does, because it's such a molecular level. It's a small level,
Yeah,
right? So how do you actually, I mean, that's such a unique, let's talk about that. That's such a unique sell. It's such a unique, I guess, conversation to have with, hey, we've got this new chemistry and it can do X, Y, Z. How do you, I guess, showcase that type of need or the lack of, hey, you don't, we can do this for you, and this we have this new chemistry. It's like, get that snake oil out of you. How do you I guess convince?
well, it's a probably one of the most difficult propositions to have, particularly in our space that doesn't view value add chemistry the same way that certain other industries might. So,
Okay.
the oil and gas industry, and I'm lumping everybody together, and I know I shouldn't do that
No,
because
no, no,
there's
let's lump,
certainly
let's lump.
some
We're talking generalities.
there's certainly some engineers and companies that really want to look at new and
Right.
emerging technologies and really grasp on, and that those are the folks that we have to work with.
And you're also seeing those, and just side note too, from around crew club tables and all stuff, you're also seeing those customers, those operators and all stuff, actually see a lot of increased improvements in their wells.
Yeah,
Whenever they do try out the new thing.
correct, which is absolutely why we're seeing a reduction in rig count, but
Right.
completed lateral feet or drilled lateral feet is actually increasing, or at least staying
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
year over year, with significantly less number of rigs out there running. So efficiencies are through the roof, and that's largely driven by technology and certainly improved operation.
Right.
For us on the chemistry front, we definitely have to follow a very specific sales cycle, and we have to have a couple of those early adopters.
Yeah, and you
The
also
people
because
that
that
we
just
work with.
builds your case a little bit. Hey, this is we have this out. This is what it does.
We can, we have a emerging technology right now. It's a dry scale inhibitor, for example, and it's a great story just
Okay.
because it took us 3 years to develop it.
Okay.
So 3 years to from a concept to a formulation to something that's commercially viable, and that's getting through all the regulatory hurdles.
Just so
These
outside of that
are
realm.
when you create a brand new molecule, there's no data on it.
Right.
So it's all lab driven data. There's no CAS number, which is basically a government identification for the new molecule.
I wish the guy would get
To be able to sell it outside the U.S.,
Okay.
there's other regulatory hurdles that have to be cleared. So a lot of that is we develop a new chemistry, we create a new molecule, we do a bunch of testing, we put together the cost on it. Can we actually make
Right.
this in an economic fashion so that customers will pay for it? But then we have to clear all these regulatory hurdles, which could take 6 months, 18 months, depending on where
Depending
we're
on how
at
fast they
play.
want to go
So
too. Yeah.
for a company the size of ours, we invest a huge amount of money in the development of these new chemistries, but we may not see revenue for 3 or 4 years from the initial investments that we
Okay.
make. We could create all the lab data in the world. We're very good at that. We
Right.
have partner labs, we have universities, we have a lot of partners out there in the energy space that help us create these data sets. A lot of the data sets we can't do internally because the equipment and the personnel just it's too expensive to have in our own labs. So we have to go
Okay.
pay for it in other labs, and we have to create partnerships to make that happen. But at the end of the day, we can drop all of the data in the world on a brand new technology. It takes a very special customer to actually understand the value of that and take the risk
Yeah.
to believe
Yeah.
in us that we have something that's going to improve A, B, or
Right.
whatever that may be. The dry scale inhibitor, for example, filled a niche. There's only a couple of them out there, but none of the other ones, as far as we're aware, do some of the things that ours does. So we
Okay.
wanted to target a very specific niche. This chemistry is not for everybody.
So this is kind of a what I'm thinking of. This kind of a long term strategy approach when you're developing molecules, you're going through this whole process. Also, is that whenever you are leading a company, leading a team, and all that stuff, do you have a different strategy whenever you are focused on long term versus short term in your previous career? How do you manage that within your team? The different levels, I guess, strategy and I guess whether it's long term, short term, talking to your team and getting them on board.
So we're always developing multiple new technology.
Okay.
Some of those are a short term, maybe it's a modification of a chemistry, maybe it's, we have something off the shelf that we need to change slightly to achieve a very specific result for a very specific application to
Okay.
the customer in a very specific region, for example. We just did this not too long ago where, in 2 or 3 months, you can create a chemistry because it checks 9 out of 10 boxes, but maybe it doesn't hit a temperature threshold,
Okay.
right? It has to function at a very specific temperature. Typically, the hot temperatures become a challenge for a lot of chemistries.
Okay.
So, when you take a chemistry that was developed for the Permian and you want to take that over to the Haynesville, for example, sometimes there's some temperature
Adjustments, right?
limitations
Yeah.
there, and you have to create some modifications in those chemistries. Those are typically short term
Okay.
in our world, which can be weeks, it can be months. And then you have the long term strategies. And sometimes those long term development strategies are, man, we have an idea, we came up with something really great, but the industry's not ready for it. Or we created something really great, but costing is not there. In other words, the raw materials aren't up to speed
Okay.
yet for us to
Okay.
be able to make it in an economic fashion, right? So we can come up with the greatest chemistry in the world, but if it's not economic for the end user, it doesn't mean it. There's no value to it.
Okay.
The age old description of value is what are you willing to pay for it, not what am I going to sell it for,
Yeah.
right? It's
Right.
so you have to create
What
to
so you
all
yeah.
operate in these buckets of, is it economic? Is it functional? Is it environmentally friendly? Are you even allowed to sell it in certain states?
Okay.
We had to recently create a new chemistry modification of a chemistry to be able to sell it in a certain highly regulated state because we had one raw material in there, a very minor amount that's not allowed to be sold in this state.
So many hurdles it seems you have to jump through and guess that line of work.
Yes.
So how okay, so when you do have all these, I guess, like, oh, do we check all the boxes? Do we have all the regulations? Do we have all stuff? How do you ensure that you have all your ducks in a row, I guess, with such a because it seems like listen, LFS chemistry, I see y'all's presence, I see this, I know the majority of your team, but it seems like a lot of hats to wear for the size that y'all are.
Yes. So you have your development chemists, the ones that have the applications experience. They understand how to formulate, how to pull different chemistries together to
Okay.
make something functionally adequate. Then we have an entire legal team. Of course, most of it's
Right.
outsourced, but they're the ones that are looking at regulatory hurdles and they're looking at patent and IP space. They're looking at trademarks. They're looking at, is anybody else in the industry, touched on this? And
Okay.
we have to be careful with it because if somebody else maybe had the same idea 10 years ago, but never took it commercial, we may never know about it unless we search the patents.
And the next thing you know, it's legal trouble at that
Correct.
point.
So
Okay.
we create these chemistries, and usually it's a concept at one point, and then we have to go through some legal background to make sure we can even move forward with it.
Okay.
And sometimes we know that there's not going to be an issue because it's something so wildly unique that more than likely it's never even been looked at before. And a lot of these ideas come from our customers, actually.
Well, I think first off, I think it's a great place to start doing your R&D. It's a great place to start solution driven creation, especially when you're dealing from the customer. So I want to shift from chemistry to kind of leadership and team building. I think we've been diving into that around the crew club table a bunch. We touched on it in our last podcast, but that's kind of a subject I've been fascinated with lately. Just kind of like different perceptions of leadership, how leadership has changed throughout. So let's talk about how leadership has changed throughout your career and what you're seeing today when it comes to effective leadership.
So I'd say early career and first one, maybe two company startup iterations, which, you know, I don't know which lens you look through, either went okay or they didn't go well
Okay.
at all.
Okay.
I would say that they were massive successes and there's a lot to learn there. I think we've covered it before that, you know, I've had one pretty epic failure
Yeah.
in
Okay.
a business, and that was not having the right people in place. And that's really the biggest reason that first one did not survive after
Because
almost
the
three and a half.
because the people.
The people we didn't have the right people.
Okay.
We had a lot of really good people.
We'll
We're
talk
missing
about
a few.
let's talk about that then. Let's talk about the really good people in the right places because that's such like a soft skill to have. I mean, to get to know someone and understand like this person's good, but they'll be great here. How do you determine that? Is that technical knowledge? Is that attitude? What makes a good teammate?
Sure. So I think that's going to be different case by case. Our particular case is we were really lacking in the financial planning
Okay.
end of the business. We did not have a CFO. We had a bunch of accountants, and this is not a knocking an accountant. An accountant is very good at what they do, but that doesn't help us grow a business.
Okay.
Accountants are a lot of data entry. They make sure that the business can afford to pay
Payroll,
bills,
blah blah blah, all that stuff.
and
Right.
they're very good at that.
But
And you
but
can't
that's
run away.
not financial strategic decisions we should be going next. Okay.
So our first attempt at this, we actually outgrew what we were capable of
Okay.
spending, and that was just poor financial planning, poor forecasting. We had a great operations team. We had a really good sales team. We had an okay management team.
Okay.
And the reason I say okay management team is I think some of us were very good in very specific areas, but we didn't have that financial planning. We didn't have conversations around financial planning.
Okay.
We just honestly we look back, and this is going to may or may not sound bad, but I'm gonna dumb it down a little bit for myself telling the story is that we would look at the bank account at the end of the month, we'd look at our accounts receivable, and we'd look at our accounts payable. Well, all three of those may not be updated
Okay.
because we didn't have a very good CFO financial plan,
Okay.
right? So you look at your AR and you look at your AP. Well, if you have a whole bunch of bills that haven't hit your desk yet, so your APs may not be up to date.
Okay.
Your AR is typically pretty current
Right.
because that's done
That's
daily.
yeah.
And your bank account typically matches exactly what you have in there. Well, we would look at that, we'd say, man, look at our AR, look at our AP, look at our bank account. We can go open a new facility in
Okay.
this other basin, and we really want to do attack
Okay.
that basin. So that's really what got us is we, sitting around the table, our CEO at the time who started the company, really, I came on a little bit later,
Okay.
um, thought thought that he was a very good financial planner, and it turns out none of us were.
Interesting. So that was a great lesson to learn, just kind of when you are growing a company.
It's a painful lesson because I'm the one that had to go around the country and tell everybody we were closing the door.
Okay.
And that was the most painful thing I've ever done in my life
We can imagine.
for no fault of their own.
So I guess hindsight, looking back on that, obviously financial, I guess having someone that's understands financial planning, financial strategy. So again, finding the right people. How do you ensure that they're the right people for the position? Is that going back? Is that attitude? Is that knowledge? That skill sets? Technical knowledge? What is that? How do you determine
Well, the technical knowledge is probably the hardest one to judge when you're starting up and you're bringing in brand new people.
that? Okay.
So, as a startup company, you tend to lean on mentors and resources of, ooh, I know that they've had success in the past. I know
Yeah.
they're this type of attitude and this type of personality. Is that somebody that I can work with? When you're talking about financial planning like a CFO role, it's really important that you have a CFO that'll tell you no.
Okay. All right.
And a lot of business owners and founders want to go with the yes.
The yes, they built the yes people around them. Right.
So it's our CFO today is absolutely fantastic. I consider him a mentor. I get to ask him
Okay.
all kinds of questions, and he's always willing to take the time to sit down and explain it. Matter of fact, just this week, I think on Monday, I had a call with him asking to explain a little deeper some of the financial
Okay.
reporting that we're doing so that I can understand it better.
So he's teaching. So that role also is the ability to teach, communicate.
Absolutely.
Okay.
At the end of the day, leading a business, I need to understand why we're making certain decisions.
Okay.
Not that I have to get down to every penny and how it's being moved. I need the 100-foot or the 1,000-foot view. I don't need to get down to the to ground level. But there were some questions, and Scott is absolutely fantastic. He's been around a long time.
Okay.
Been pulled out of retirement a couple of times. Um, and he's been an incredible resource.
So, okay. So identifying people, getting to know people, and making sure they're in the right position.
Yes.
So when it comes to making strategic decisions, how much do you go with what's
your gut reaction versus kind of the circles around you, or the mentorship, advice, feedback?
So the feedback and the leadership opinions is absolutely critical. They're in most cases they're the boots on the ground,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So we've mentioned a lot of names in previous podcasts and everything, but
Yeah.
our chief commercial officer Neil Hayes, our
Hmm.
VP of technology Darren Oswald, uh, some of our sales leadership with Chris Carpenter, and
Yeah.
Will Culpepper, and some of these other guys
Phenomenal people.
are incredible, right? But they have the information.
Okay.
So each of them has to make decisions based on the information that they receive. And then ultimately, there's a few decisions I have to make
Right.
based on input from all of them.
Okay.
So depending on what those decisions are, it may or may not even come to my desk. Right? There's a lot of decisions that they have full autonomy. Just
So you're
make it.
empowered. Yeah. Make the, don't come up to me with everything. Come to me with the solution versus just a problem.
Yes, and I've historically always been a fan of make a fast decision
Okay.
and let's adjust from there.
Okay. All right.
You know,
So yeah, I've been actually in trouble for making fast decisions and trying to make it work historically.
it can always get you.
I mean, I
There's
think
no
it's gonna
doubt
probably
about
happen
that.
too in the future with me, 100%.
If it doesn't happen, then you're not pushing the boundaries.
What are Well, what is okay? Let's again these are hot seat questions. So again, I'm just thinking the things that are popping up to kind of interrupt a little bit. That's what I do here. So, what are some challenges that you face on a some recent challenges that I guess that you've been facing as whether you grow a business, whether it's whatever strategy you're choosing, finding the right people. What's some challenges you're facing as a leader?
So finding the right people is has always been a challenge.
Right.
It's
Is it more difficult now?
it is difficult now. I'd say we're probably in one of the most difficult times.
But you know what's interesting though? Let's talk about that. Like with so many people, with all these consolidations, with so much talent being on, I guess the sideline. Why is it so difficult to find people?
What I don't sit on the E&P side of the table, so I can't speak to their challenges in hiring. But most of the consolidation we've seen has been on the E&P side.
All right, but we're seeing some of that trickle over the
We need a
OFS
lot
side.
more of it on the service.
Okay, all right.
And I'm going to lump us all into the service side because we all support the E&Ps at the end of the day.
Do you see that happening? What's the crystal ball? And listen, this is not a prediction or anything like that. But I'm curious about what. And because we have these conversations, I was talking to a buddy of mine yesterday, and he's like, "Man, I got this article. It's like, is the bottom here for OFS? Like, I mean, are people going to operate in the negative just to keep cash flow coming in, even though it's not smart business?" So it's a lot of worry out there. There's a lot of concern right now for the OFS side of the business, and I'm kind of curious on kind of what's your take
Sure.
on how everything's going, and not only that, what's going to separate different OFS companies.
So I think we're entering what I would call the bottom in terms of valuations of OFS companies.
Okay,
So there's a lot of companies
are we there yet?
that I wish I could predict.
Okay.
I feel like we should be right there.
Getting
If not there, we should be really close.
we got to get there. It's okay. All right.
When you look at company valuations and you look at returns on your ROIs on your
Right.
company, if we were going to go sell LFS, for example, what type of multiple of EBITDA plus assets or whatever you
Okay.
might get for the company is ridiculously low.
Okay.
You get outside of oil and gas.
So
you
that
get
means
into
not a
some
lot
of
of people want to sell right now.
it's not that they don't want to sell; it's what people are willing to pay for it.
Okay.
Right? OFS has historically had a much lower multiple on EBITDA than
Yeah.
a lot of other businesses. So you get into technology licensing, software, things like that can drive 15 to 20
Okay.
x EBITDA.
Right.
OFS, you're lucky to get to 4x. So you may have this amazing company. It's producing some really healthy cash flow. You start to get into these fundamentals of do we just do cash distributions to our employees or do we sell the company for a one time? And that one time may not be enough. When the offers come in to outweigh what you could do in cash distribution. So um, I think the companies coming into 2025, the ones that run on zero debt,
Okay.
are going to be in a really good position, and the ones that are vertically integrated are going to be in a really good spot.
Okay.
In the chemical space in particular, there's a lot of new chemical companies that pop up every year.
Why is that? I mean, it would seem with such R&D and why is new chemicals pop up?
Well,
I mean,
not to knock them because there's a space for every single player
but you
in this
know you
business,
can't
but
knock them because you are on a guest on this podcast right now, and
yeah,
there's no notes here. And if there are, we'll jujitsu. We'll jujitsu. So anyway, go on.
um, you know, we had a portion of our company acquired around 2021.
Okay.
right? And the reason we did that was to become vertically integrated. When we started up LFS, did not go out and buy facilities and build big tank farms and
Right.
buy a bunch of equipment and go asset heavy and rack up a bunch of debt. And, we also realized that at some point that we can't just toll manufacture and we can't just rely on other people to make chemistry for us.
Okay.
Right. So when I say that, there's a lot of our what I would say is competition that are buying a chemical, slapping a label on it or a name on it, and then they resell it. Now, they have a purpose. They're in a basin. They have local logistics. It's
Okay.
fantastic.
Okay.
They provide a service around the chemistry that a lot of manufacturers can't provide.
So it's kind of like I guess a comparison to that would be like it's like you're like Garrison Brothers, like a Texas, like you make your own stuff versus one of those still Austin things where just kind of they go and they buy all that stuff from Ohio and then they make some slap a label.
Yes.
Okay.
And we are starting to see a little bit of consolidation. There was a public announcement the other day where S&F, which is one of the largest, I think it might actually be the largest water soluble polymers company, is
Okay.
buying a couple of more local distribution and applications type companies.
So you're seeing that a little bit in the chemistry.
We're seeing that now. I have no idea what the financials of that acquisition looks like. Right? It's definitely none of my
Right.
business. Maybe one day it'll become a little more known what that looked like, and hopefully it drives a little bit higher multiple for people that have some perceived value outside of just a reseller. I know one or two. I know two of the companies that were in the middle of this acquisition, and it seems like it was a very reasonable
Okay.
acquisition. And I'm sure there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle that I'll probably never know about. But you're always going to see some of it. We've seen it on the frac side. We've seen it a little bit on the chemistry side,
It's on the drilling side too. Yeah.
and on the drilling side. And I think for our space in particular, on the chemical side, in order to be picked up and create value, you've got to have some unique technologies that
Okay.
other people really want.
Okay. So as an OFS, as an OFS company, what would I guess that would be one of those things would be a competitive advantage. How would you survive right now? Take away the debt and all that stuff. Like, how would you survive as an OFS company? Would that be investing in technology? Would that be broadening your customer base? What would it be?
I think the minute you stop investing in technology and you stop investing in sales,
Okay.
you're probably on a path down. Uh, we hear it, we see it all the time where it's it's constant cuts in
Yeah.
order to stay healthy, and sometimes as the owner of a company, you have to put back in and say, we need to push forward. We do believe in what we're doing. We believe in the technology that we have. How do we get in front of more people?
Okay.
Right. There's a lot of ways to market and be in front of people. Um, you know, we have a marketing company, and you're well aware of.
Yep.
In
Yep.
Midnight, they do an incredible job
You do an awesome job for me too. Yeah. I love.
managing all of our outward looking everything from websites and is your dog won't get fed.
My dog's gonna get fed. My dog and my make believe dog and two real cats. Yes.
Um, so the minute you stop investing in your business, I think is when you start going backwards. When you say, "Oh, we don't know what's coming," or the market's getting really tight, the number of opportunities out there may be shifting a little bit,
Right.
in a downward trend. And the frac market for us has always been fairly predictable outside of a COVID type event, right?
Yeah.
You can kind of watch what's happening on the drilling side, and you can predict what's going to happen on the frac market. And then as drilling picks back up, you can kind of assume that the frac market is going to pick back up at
Okay.
that point. So it's those cycles are fairly easy, and you see a lot of people retract when things get tough. And right now we're doing some things that are probably the opposite of that trend, and it's is now the right time to look at adding to the company.
So do you find kind of going against like what others are doing? Like I've been studying this thing about kind of like if you're a salesperson, be the opposite of the salesperson. You know what I mean? Like if you're this, be the opposite of this. I mean, I think that's a way first off to draw in and stick out and also to connect with people. So whenever it's like this, do you like doing the opposite? Not obviously all the time. You're obviously there's some strategy and some financial decision, all that stuff behind it, but like times like this, do you like kind of pushing against the envelope a little
I do, but it also depends on how you manage the company when times are really good.
bit? Okay.
Right. So if you don't overspend when everything's going great, just because revenues are high and your gross margin's doing well and you're putting some money in the bank, and
Right.
your R&D budgets are fully funded for the year, and that as long as you don't go out and overspend at those times and you sit on some cash reserves so that when times get tough and maybe there is some talent that hits the
Yeah.
market, you could say, company A over here is starting to struggle, and we've heard that they may have some layoffs or reductions. It's a great time to go out there and try to get some people that are
Okay.
possibly undervalued.
Right. Okay.
It's to me right now, it's a little bit crazy how much we have to put into G&A, into payroll.
Okay.
Um, but that's what it takes to acquire really good talent. You have to be willing to invest. I'm sure us, like a lot of companies out there, have struggled to bring on that talent
It's so
of
difficult these
recent.
days to find talent. Like again, I mean, whether it's the EMP and all that stuff, but even on the service side, whether I mean, people are saying, hey, "Do you know anyone in Midland? You know anyone in Oklahoma City?" Like, it's still difficult to be like, yeah, I guess this. I mean, it's a lot. It's more challenging now than it's been previously.
Absolutely. And you and I have had that conversation off the record.
Yes.
Hey, if you hear of anybody that might be looking, here's where we're shopping.
Well, here's your
It's
inbox. It's gonna be ripped.
it's,
Rip your
yeah,
inbox
I
after
mean,
this podcast.
we're actively pursuing right now.
So, how has sales changed? How has business development changed that you've seen throughout your career? Because I think it has changed. I think the traditional way to sell is it's becoming rare.
Yeah, I'd say our biggest challenge, and this probably spans about 20 years, the change that
Okay.
I
Yeah.
personally have seen. I, I think 20 years ago, maybe a little longer, you saw more career employees,
Okay. Right.
particularly at the NP level. Service companies have always had a lot of movement.
Well, Noble Drilling. I first started Noble Drilling. They named their rigs after long term employees.
Yeah. So I think salespeople 20 years ago built a relationship with somebody as an engineer. Maybe they were 25, yeah, 30 years old. You built an engineer and you got to work with them for the next 20 years within that same company
Right.
in a lot of cases. And I'm not saying that doesn't exist today because there's definitely still exists.
But I know what you mean. Yeah.
Today, we see so much movement, right? And I'll tell you right now, but personally, without it's going to be a plug for LinkedIn, but without something like LinkedIn, there's times you go a month or two without talking to somebody, and all of a sudden they're in a new
Yeah.
position
Yeah.
or a new company, or you know, best case they're in a new position within the company.
Yeah.
Which that part has always been the case, right? Younger engineers move from production to completions to drilling to
Right.
reservoir to geology, whatever it may be, to try to get all the various disciplines. So salespeople are constantly chasing, trying to find the decision makers,
Right.
and that's a task. I mean, there's a lot of accounts that we work with that could take 2 or 3 years to turn a sales cycle.
Just understanding who has the authority, who can make the decisions, who has the power.
Absolutely, and this all starts with relationships.
Okay.
I know there's a lot of folks out there that would say that no, the technology speaks for itself. You go in with a technical presentation. I'm going to tell you right now, my personal experience, and I think the experience in our entire team, if you don't have a personal relationship, it's very difficult to get to the technical discussion.
That's just to kind of echo that. I mean, that's what you're hearing across the board. It's like networks matter, communication matters, your personal relationship matters. I mean, so the fact is, you're right. People might have started working with their 25-year-old engineer all the way up and all stuff, but still, relationships matter. Relationships matter if you take a call, with someone, if you'll have a meeting with someone, if you do a lunch with someone, and it's getting so much more difficult. At least is what I've seen this day and age. I mean, we're all hyper connected, but it's been so much more difficult to build a relationship with people this day and age.
Absolutely, and that's the reason it's very difficult for us to hire sales is that reason right there. When we interview for sales, one of the first questions we ask is, how healthy is your Rolodex? We need to know that you have a Rolodex,
Okay.
people that you can call on that will take a meeting. And then secondly is, are you going to have a passion for what we're doing?
Right. Okay.
If you don't have a passion for the chemistry, in the sense that if you don't exude confidence in what you're selling,
Yeah.
right? If this is just another product A,
Yeah.
I've done it. I have it in a pitch here because they offered me a great job.
Right.
Your customers are not going to buy what we're offering unless you show a lot of passion for what you're selling.
Yeah. Your words are not going to match your tone, your pitch, your confidence, your body language. I mean, they're not going to be into it.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we've had a little bit of turnover on the sales side because of that.
Okay.
And it's understandable. Chemistry is
Right.
very difficult to understand.
I know.
It's
I know that. A lot of people know that.
yes, it's very difficult to understand. It's not something that the EMP can. It's not tangible to them, right? It's not
it's
casing.
molecular level. Yeah. It's
It's
yeah.
They pump certain things because they know that, okay, it's on my spreadsheet for my well program. We have to pump
Right.
a friction reducer. We have to pump sometimes a scale inhibitor. Sometimes we have to pump this. But when you're selling value add chemistries in, say, the surfactant space or the clay control space or the prop and bed space or the formation preservation area, that's not something that you can just see and touch. These are things that are going to add long term value to the
Yes.
not, okay, I put casing in the ground. I got to see that. I know it's there. I
Yeah.
know what
I
it
got
does.
feel, touch it. Yeah.
So finding the sales staff to come on board that has either heard of your company and said really good things are floating around the industry. We've actually had some interactions with your company out in the field, for example,
Okay.
and the feedback's great. I want to be a part of that team.
Okay.
That's who we're looking for in our organization is people that want to be a part of this team, not for a paycheck. Paycheck's going to come. If you're really good at what you do, the paycheck will come.
So yeah, it's I agree with that. Why do you think it's so difficult these days for people to kind of grow their networks, to get out there and meet people?
I think the COVID era was
Yeah.
pretty big hurting on that. A lot changed just in the scope of business, how we conduct business.
Was it people got more comfortable? Like what
I
was it?
think you went to the work from home mentality, and it's everything can be done from phone calls and the occasional video conference. And I'll tell you, nothing beats a handshake. Nothing beats being able to look somebody in the eye and get actual feedback.
Right.
A lot can be done over video conference that you get a lot of yeses, and then it doesn't really mean a
Right.
yes. But if you're sitting there in person, those yeses generally mean yes.
Right.
They're also not afraid to say no. Now's not the time, or no, I don't think it's a good fit. And
It's
you can read that language, and it can be a no, but come back later, or no, this isn't right now. Whereas over a video conference or a phone call, you get
you're just looking to get off of it. You're like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. Yeah, well, I'm not gonna follow. Yeah. It's a lot less commit.
yes,
Yeah. I think, it's one of those things too. It's like whether it's consolidation, whether it's trying to find work, whether it's sales, it doesn't matter whether you're an intern, it doesn't matter what stage you are in your career. Whether it's COVID, people get comfortable working from home. It's like, oh, well, I don't need to know network or know people. The realities of having a shallow network, the realities of not knowing people, and whether it's new technology coming out there. Because if I'm an EMP operator, I'm not in touch with a lot of what's going on, or I don't know what's new technology coming out there, or what new chemistries out there. Then you're kind of on the back side of the forefront of what you should be doing, adding value to that company, and that's through communication, that's through conversations. And I'll get off my soapbox here, but I do find it there's real proof, there's real world examples of how a shallow network can hinder and hurt your career. And whether you're an EP, whether you're a salesperson, also. So I always encourage people, like, I don't think I'm in the business of like networking. I'm in the business of making people aware you gotta know.
sure,
I think, and you see it all across the board, service side, EMP, other industries too.
yeah, and I think another way that the industry could be helped, particularly the OFS side, is in some more advanced sales training that focus on today's world.
Okay.
You know, a lot of what you do is huge for this, right? It's kind of goes back to what we just talked about, that kind of the world has changed
Yes.
in terms of how we make connections, how you create a long-term relationship.
Yeah.
Right. I think we've shifted into this, and it's been coming for a long time. This is before COVID, but we've shifted into this. I need this right now. Or I
Transaction.
need it all. I think the strategic buy is a little bit of a lost art.
Yeah.
It's, did you pull the right strings right now? Because if we wait till tomorrow, I've lost interest.
Yeah.
So we're working on a couple of different sales trainings right now and sales strategies, and it's something that you and I are going to talk about a little bit as well. Um, we need to ramp up the continuing education, the sales training, the operations training, the safety training.
Yes.
Um, and I feel like some of the big sales training organizations are still pre-COVID
Okay.
in their training.
Okay.
Not to mention names, but if you look at some of their manuals and their books on how
Kind
they're
of
going to train,
outdated.
it hasn't changed in a long
Right.
time. So for companies like us, we're looking at this like, well, let's get our entire sales staff into some sales training.
Right.
Some could really gain some value from it. Others are going to sit through it and, they're
Yeah, I have to
highly
be
successful
here.
today. They're going to feel like they don't need it. Hopefully they get a little something from it.
Yeah.
Even your most successful salespeople who are driving, again, we're probably no different than most organizations where it's an 80-20 type of a scenario. 20% of the sales
Does
folks are driving 80% of the revenue. We love to see that change. That's historically since they've tracked information has been that way.
Yeah.
I don't know how you change that in our space. But again, if we put our entire sales team through one of these sales trainings for a day or 2 days or 3 days,
Right.
and, there's public speaking training, there's the Toastmasters and
Yes.
the Wilsons and the Sandlers and all these. But I think our organization could benefit hugely if they would. We need to advance that.
I think there's a lot of sales, or I mean, I talked to a lot of buddies, and it's like this tactics used in 2018, 2017, 2019 are still being applied today. It's a sharpened pencil and it's bitching to grind. That's kind of, and also it's a lot of n- back in the day, but earlier you could go like, hey, let's go grab a beer, or let's go to this happy hour, meet some folks, grab a beer. And I was like, those days to me, from what I've seen, are gone. It's people very rarely enter into an environment where they don't know, where they have to network, even if it's a casual happy hour. So I still know people doing the same strategies they've done for 7 years ago, and they're still in the same results, which is nothing. And there's no evolution. There's no thought of like, oh, maybe we should change our strategy. And
Yeah,
for me,
I think,
it's shocking. There's no point. That was just me making a point. That wasn't a question.
yeah,
It's interesting the fact that we do need to evolve as an industry in our communications, the conversations we're having, the knowledge we're sharing, and being stuck and just bitching about it is not a strategy.
sure. And I'm guilty of it right now as well. There's some things I've historically always done,
Yeah.
and I'm still kind of pushing for those today. And I need a little guidance on how to get out of that rut.
Okay.
A good example of that is we get the entire company together, uh, management, sales.
Yep.
Some of the folks from ops, not all of them, because we can't have them all come
Yeah.
out of the
I get
field
that.
and facilities. But a lot of the leadership get together twice a year.
Okay.
We do a kind of a summer retreat, and then we do one around November, and that's just historically what I've always done. And it gives every salesperson an opportunity to talk about the challenges they're facing. What do they need from the organization?
Okay.
The organization gets to respond with how can we better support you in your efforts. Sometimes that's here's some ideas on new chemistry. Sometimes it's I need a little more support from ops in this area. I'm really struggling here. Sometimes it's I spend too much time in front of the computer and I need to be out more. Okay, great. These are great.
Which is a huge thing for a lot of people. Right.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm trying to figure out a way, and I'll be working with our sales leadership and certainly Neil on this is how do we change this up? Like how do we get it to be more energetic? Because a lot of times it comes across to me at the end of this is okay. Well, we had to do this.
Okay.
Oh, Jim
That's a
wanted it.
tough feeling.
We had
Yeah.
to do this. Now, some of it I get a lot out of it in the sense that end of year we really start talking about the next year. We start talking about forecasting for the
Right.
next year because running a business you have to have a budget, at least a target
Okay.
for your budget, and a lot of that comes from the sales side. Here's what we're seeing in the industry. Here's what the activity level is going to be. Here's you know we're hearing some rumors that this customer may be acquired, that customer may be acquired, this one's acquiring more acreage, and how's that going to affect our opportunities for, say, for 2025? So in November or early December, we'll have another big powwow
Okay.
and we'll talk about these things. The sales team will present what they've always presented. And I feel like it's something I need to work on and maybe we need to take a completely different approach. I don't know what that approach is today. I would love some feedback.
But you might not have the right answer. I say whenever you feel like whenever you have that feeling that you do have to change something, whether it's the communication strategy or the type of event, you're not gonna have the right answer. You just gotta try stuff out, in
Sure.
my opinion, I think. So wrapping this up, we've been talking for a little bit. What are some key skill sets that individuals need today to thrive in the oil and gas industry? On the OFS side.
Yes, I think time management is a big item
Go
these
on.
days. So this kind of goes back into that whole working from home,
Yeah.
video conferences. I think we've run into uh, broadly very poor time management.
Okay.
Meaning there's no way, and I don't want to go down this path because it leads towards micromanagement. I hate micromanagement. I want everybody just do your thing.
You seem like a guy that would hate.
I
You want to hire
absolutely,
people. I trust you. Do your job. Get it done. Thank you. Yeah.
unless we're training, then I
Right.
need somebody to micromanage
Right.
and tell me how bad I was at something. But,
Okay.
in the business world, and I'm guilty of it as well. You're working from home, and it's distraction here and it's distraction there. And you look back at the end of the day, you go, man, I had 15 things to do today, and I only got 12 done. But
And
I
those,
actually had the time to do them, but I got distracted.
right.
I think that plays a big role in sales, particularly today.
Okay.
Ops not so much because ops is pretty structured, right? We know what trucks have to roll at what time, so
Right.
you can't mess that up.
You have to have time.
You have to do.
You have to have some management
Yes.
of your schedule.
I think sales, we've really entered this. Um, Neil actually brought this point up several months ago. Actually, brought it up many times. Is that when he and I were working together previously, that was before LFS,
Right.
we could go to any city, Denver, Oklahoma City, Pittsburgh, you name it, and you could have 7 good meetings in a day. I mean, a full day, right? Started at 7 a.m. with a really solid breakfast meeting. You get people out of the office, you'd finish all the way through dinner, fly home the next day, but you had 7 great.
Yeah, it was a great. You crunch. It was crunch
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
And sometimes you're running from one meeting to
Right.
the next
Yeah.
because you're like, man,
That was a great meeting. We're late.
yeah,
Yeah.
how are we even going to make it there? You're
Those are the
calling.
good old days.
Yes. And now Neil and I travel together, and it's you go to Denver and you get 2 meetings out of it, and then you have a bunch of phone calls and emails, and it's not always the case, but I'd say generally speaking, our days are not as productive when it comes to the sales side of it.
Yeah, but okay. I mean, I can see that. I mean, it's again, it's a hyper connected, disconnected world. I mean, going and making those 7 appointments that day. I mean, that was achievable back then. 'Cause people would meet. This day and age, it's very. It's like the frustrating thing for me is like, hey, let's have a phone call. Are you available next week for 15 minutes? Like, I'll send you a calendar. It's like,
Yeah.
just pick up the phone and call. Right?
Yes.
I have found, and this is just kind of an observation, kind of wrapping this up. I have found the stuff that I thought worked for the past 2 years is not working now. Right. So, for example, like I don't like before I said the oil field never Google. We just pick up the phone. Hey, Jim, who do you know for chemistry? I go LFS. Now I feel the oil field Googles because we don't talk. I feel that like I was going on a tangent, but like emails, I thought people would check. I think there's more business done picking up the phone and having conversations because I don't think people check emails anymore these days. And that's just kind of like I'm seeing this like
Yeah.
this pull away whether we communicate, correspond on our phones or through email. I feel that there's a huge pullback from that. Now people are kind of going old school, like picking up the phone, calling people. You get more stuff done.
I don't even really have a good response to
There's
that.
no
Other
response to
other
that.
than you're dead on with that. It's you have the option to not respond.
Yes,
And heck, I'm guilty of it. I've been called out a few times, like, man, I sent you that email, and
Yeah.
it's like, well, I mean, I read it. I'm
I
sorry, I
meant to
didn't respond.
respond. I meant to respond to it.
Yeah. I've been accused many times of being a horrible text responder. I mean,
Well,
one of the guys we train with, I think I showed you the other day. I responded after, I don't know, a day or two to
oh yeah,
a text he sent, and he said, "Man, you're one of the most incredible."
you're brilliant at
Yes.
communicating.
And it's like, well, I read it, but you didn't really ask me a question. And there was 30 other texts that came in,
I'm so guilty of that.
and sometimes you're driving, or sometimes you're at my son's jujitsu, and it's not the right time to respond to
Yeah.
that text. It's like, well, when I get somewhere,
And it never
I'll respond to it. And we've all tried to. I'd like to think we've all tried to not text and drive as much
Right.
anymore. I can remember just 6 or 7 years ago. I mean, it was constant while I was driving. You had the phone up and you're texting.
Not me, Evelyn. Not me. Not daddy.
Uh, you know, I was guilty of it, but it was very responsive. You didn't miss anything. It
Yeah.
was constant responding.
Well, now we know not to do that.
But then I forget to respond to.
Yeah, I know. I'm
And
guilty
I,
of that too.
and I'm bringing that up. I think that's the feedback from a lot of what we would say is our customer base as well. Is they may read it, they may read the email. I don't doubt that the emails that get sent don't get at least the subject line
Right.
and maybe the first sentence read.
Right.
And we've actually had a lot of conversation about that. Is how do we adjust the way we communicate, written
Yes.
or oral,
Yes.
to get their attention? I think you just did an entire topic on this elevator speech,
Yeah.
particularly with your intern training.
Yeah.
I think we need to get back to. I
Yeah.
think that's a big part of where some of the sales training needs to go is how can I get your attention in 20 words or less,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
2 sentences or 5 seconds, whatever metric.
At first, you think I need to do this background, but it's really kind of like providing that value in an impactful way.
Yeah, and I've always been a big fan. I don't think emails should be any more than about 3 or 4 sentences.
I like that.
If it needs to be any longer than that, it needs to be a report that actually makes sense.
Okay.
But an email should be a memo.
I like
It should be, here's what we got going on. Here's what we're doing about it. Have a great day. Some of these emails that you get that are, take you 15 minutes to
novels.
read,
And you're like,
you lose interest after the first paragraph.
Yeah.
And so I think we really need to focus on the subject line. How do I get your attention?
Yeah.
Because when you're looking at it on your phone, it's the only thing that pops up. Subject. It's the subject. Who did it come from and what's the subject?
Yeah.
I think pre-COVID, you could send an email and it just said lunch. And then in the body you put, hey, you free on Tuesday
Yeah.
at 11:30 for lunch at wherever. And it was, yeah, sure. Or now I can't do that day.
Right.
Now, if you put lunch in the subject line, that's the first thing these guys delete.
Man.
Yeah, I don't have time for that. I don't want.
Yeah. People don't have time.
And again, I think that comes down to that time management.
Right.
I think they do have time. I don't think a whole lot's changed other than our ability to manage time.
We got a forward manager. I mean, I'm guilty of that too, working at the house. So you got to have some structure.
We all are.
You have to have a little bit of planning and intent. And I think having intention and being strategic this day and age is vastly more important than it's been previously in the past.
Absolutely. And there's some positive that's come from more remote work, I'll bring up Neil again. I think one of the greatest things in the world is Neil actually, his health has increased dramatically. He goes for a walk every single day,
Every morning.
makes a couple of calls, and that's awesome. You didn't do that in an office.
I'll walk and talk every morning. And literally anxiety drops and kind of plan your day, get a little
Sure.
more clear. You take that hour to go for that walk, and though you want to get behind that computer, but you give yourself that. Oh, 100%. I'm a huge fan of that.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the positives is I think we're becoming a healthier industry as a whole.
yeah.
And it's because of some of this stuff. You have time to go to the gym. You have time to go for an hour long walk and make a couple of conference
Yeah.
calls or video calls from your phone because you can do all. We're connected, right? We're hyper connected, so you can do it from anywhere. You put your your AirPods in and you go for a walk and
You knock out 3 or 4 calls.
whether you're sitting at a desk or on a walk, nobody cares.
You actually, I think you're actually more productive. Personally,
Agree 100%. I'm way less distracted if I'm on a walk on a conference call than I am sitting at my desk.
and you're thinking clear.
Sitting at your desk, you're reading the emails that are coming in. You got 3 other windows.
There's
going on.
a lot. 3. Man, that's rookie numbers. You gotta get those up. I got a lot of windows going up. Hey, listen, you got to catch a flight, buddy. I appreciate your time. What is the wise words of Jim Holmes as you sign us off? What's going on? What's the wise words?
Man, learn a couple of good chokes.
Learn a couple good chokes. Tap early.
Always be aware of your surroundings. Be ready to to jump in and destroy at any moment's notice.
And also be willing to have your ego checked at the door.
Always got to be willing to have your ego checked.
No, but that's been one of the coolest things about doing jujitsu. It's like you have a 120-pound like high school kid kick the shit out, and you're like, all right, I dig this. I like
Yeah.
this. You know what I mean?
It
Like,
happened last night.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Coach Noah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I think 2 times actually.
Who's going to be a petroleum engineer?
At
I
School
just
of
know-
Mines. Yeah.
Colorado School of Mines. So I'm looking forward to kind of wrapping him on some of
Absolutely.
Three
Really
clubs
looking
of-
forward to it.
I dig that. I said I'll teach you communication. You teach me jujitsu. So
Well,
it's a fair.
Sure, you'll be good at teaching communication.
I hope so. So Jim, I want to thank you for taking. Oh, I don't know. We'll see about that. Jim, I want to thank you for taking time for coming here today. Coming in your gi. Just you never know what's going to happen in this world. I think you're going to go on a flight in that, and hopefully, people understand not to take the aisle seat.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll fight you for the opposite.
I appreciate that. I'm an aisle seat guy too. I want to thank everyone out there for tuning in again. Jim Holmes, the president of LFS Chemistry, and you reach out to him. Find his company on LinkedIn. Check their stuff out. Obviously, it's beautiful marketing. Thanks to Midnight Marketing, the whole
Absolutely.
group there. And we thank you, and we look forward to talking to y'all soon. It's the Energy Crew.
Thanks.